Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Hire and Fire podcast. This is your host, Jeremy Miller. I'm with Amanda Anderson, as always. Hi, Amanda.
Hello, hello.
So we are back for episode number 3 of our 4-part series on sex, religion, and politics in the workplace. So 1 episode apiece for sex, religion, and politics. And then, like it or not, we got a little follow-up question list that no, I have not tackled, but we're going to do that in episode 4, having to do with a few questions about the different areas that we've basically discussed already. So,
well, just stuff that we unearthed, even of like, I don't know that answer.
Right,
yeah,
right. So check out the podcast on the sexual harassment. I believe that's live.
That one is live.
That one is live.
And then this week, so today's the 19th. So on the probably the 20th or 21st, the religion one is going to go live.
And both of them were solid. Sexual harassment episode, we go through just a lot of the nuts and bolts of it. Fairly tame on our discussion. Religion at the very end, we got a little after it with each other. So that was kind of fun. So you can take a look at that and let us know if you have any opinions on it. I got some quick feedback from somebody that I'm connected to on LinkedIn that I've helped before in the capacity of helping him get a job. And he had a really cool question that I helped him figure out, which I wanted to discuss with the group. Kind of cool. So we'll jump into that. You have a little game activity question sheet for us later. We'll see what happens there. And then today's discussion is all about politics in the workplace. So a little bit different than sexual harassment and religion because of the fact that political groups are not protected classes.
Yep.
So it's not just as simple as, hey, I'm a Democrat, hey, I'm a Republican, so therefore I can say whatever I want. So that brings in some interesting twists, which we'll obviously talk about.
Plus, some of the stuff was actually surprising of what you can do as an employer. So that was
like the rights of an employer are a wee bit too aggressive in your opinion.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Fair enough. So that's totally cool. So we're going to jump into all that stuff here today. The one that I wanted to bring up first. So I have a consultant that I helped place years ago. And what's cool about being in this industry is, you can help a lot of people over the years, and a lot of them you lose touch with over time, especially since I'm not personally recruiting anymore. But it's nice to connect with these people. So here's the situation. I had helped him find a position, and he sends me a message unsolicited on LinkedIn, and he goes, hey, I don't know if you remember me. You helped me 6 years ago, and I teased him, of course, that I do remember him. He goes, I want to ask you for some advice. For a while now, I've been thinking about taking some time off from work. My company does not have sabbatical or unpaid leave, so my only option is to quit. The only thing that I'm struggling with and makes me question this decision is, how hard would it be for me to get back into the workforce after a couple of years off? Also, if it matters, I just turned 40. I know you can't predict the future, but I was wondering what you've seen in your years of experience. Is it easy to place someone in IT after being out of the workforce for a couple of years? Appreciate it. Let me know. So I obviously would have replied to him anyways, but really good question. And it doesn't come up very often because it's, I don't think we would do an entire podcast on sabbaticals and whether it's a good idea, but worthy of mentioning. So here was my basic response. And if you disagree or agree, I'd love to hear it, or thoughts in general. And then anybody out there, if you've been in this situation and you had a positive or negative experience, or you just have a good opinion on it, let us know, because I have mine and it might not be the same as yours. So I just let him know. I'm like, hey, this is a really good question. Honestly, it's not impossible. So I basically try to tell him, like, yes, you can obviously take a couple of years off and get back into the industry. I have seen it happen over and over again. I've personally helped dozens of people in that situation. But I told him, hey, this is a legit risk. Like, if you're gone for 2 years, like solid, not like I got laid off and I was out for 6 months and it sucked and I did everything I could. Like, you bounce for 2-3 years, right? I just said it's a legit risk that you get boxed out of your skill set. And when you're trying to get back in after 2 years, your financial worth will probably be through the floor. So A, you're going to struggle to get back into it, and your value is going to suck a little bit. Lastly, I said, you have to understand this is a candidate market right now. So job seekers are in high demand. And because of that, the demand, basically just simple economics, means that people start getting more income. So higher and higher wages. So I told him, hey, if you take 2 years off, will the economy have switched back to an employer's market? And therefore, it's super competitive to get every job. And now you're competing against 400 candidates and you're the guy with 2 years of no work history. Or could you potentially get lucky and it's still a candidate market and you could argue that that was the right time to do it? It's kind of the debate of like, when do I retire? Well, the real question is if you have enough money to do it, you should probably retire when the market's propped up. So you're selling any of your investments when it's high, right? So, I said, obviously it's tough to say, but that's the best explanation. So I was just trying to help them understand, like it or not, people will judge you. They just will.
And a few other things to think about. So a few years in technology, being out of the game is an eternity.
Right. Just from a
staying up to date.
Yes.
That's an eternity. So like if someone's going to do this, I would tell them that they need to stay up to date with the updates, any technology advances, and then be able to show that they did that.
Yeah.
You also would want to stay very networked. So even though you're not working, you want to stay very active and engaged with people in your network and in the industry so that you have connections that you can call upon once you want to get back in the game. And then the only other thing that from like a hiring standpoint that I think I would question, because I've literally been in this situation where I'm hiring someone that maybe they were a stay-at-home mom for a while, maybe they had an illness, or maybe they just, like this guy wants to take some time off. I would always be asking them about getting back into a schedule. You've gone for a few years where you wake up when you want, you go when you want, you don't have to ask for time off or like decline plans because of work. And now you're going to go back into that.
And now you're waking up to alarms at 6:15 and
going
battling
like
gridlock. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that has been, and for some of my hires, it was a valid concern because they couldn't get back.
And I've hired people like this too, where I'm jokingly saying to them, like, you're going to need a week or two to rub off the cobwebs just to like be used to sitting in an office for X number of hours. It's a good question, obviously. The biggest challenge here is perception, in my opinion. So I've seen everybody try everything on resumes. Like they'll add a job description type setup that says like anything from self-employment, or I was off because I was helping a terminally ill cancer relative. So you could like add that to your resume, like do the same thing, right? Like company, title, dates, job description, but just put, sabbatical, unemployed, whatever.
Just time off for personal reasons.
So you don't have to just ignore it on your resume and like your last job ended in 2018 and you just smile. You know what I mean? Like that's probably not the best idea.
But you don't have to divulge why.
No, of
especially
course not. No.
Post-COVID, I think this has changed to some degree. At least it's loosened, or it should have, of like we have breaks and there's no reason why you can't take a break. Like if you're financially in a situation where I can take a year off, why am I not allowed to, right?
Yeah.
Like that should be fine. So I think post-COVID, that's fine. But like if you put that on your resume, I would just say like, if, gap in employment for personal reasons, but then list what you've done to stay relevant.
Okay, that's a good point as well.
And be like, but in the meantime, I built a website. I freelanced for this, for my cousin. And you don't even have to say cousin for
whatever.
For this, here's the link so you can look at it. Like, especially if you're in IT, like truly in the, like you love this, you're going to still be doing stuff. So like, were you on forums? Were you, what were you doing? Continuing ed, new certifications, that should go under there.
I don't care if you were taking a Toastmasters class for better public speaking, like, take advantage of it is a good point. And that's really good practical advice. The perception is reality problem is an interesting one because even if you're financially capable of doing so, 99.9% of people have no fucking clue what that's like. So when a manager or even a recruiter understands that you've been out of work for a couple of years, everybody's mind goes to like, how? So
because it's a foreign concept in this country.
4 years with no income. Like, hey, no judges, but like, hey, you're an engineer, good for you, but it's not like you're a retired patent holder, or whatever. But nonetheless, the problem is obviously you could have a super legitimate reason, but a lot of people, won't understand that. So just go into the situation with it on the top of your mind that the person you're talking to probably can't relate.
Correct.
So you could even joke about it, like, hey, I get it. A lot of people can't relate with this, but I'm fortunate, and you could tell why or not. But that's a legitimate challenge. Also, a lot of people, unfortunately, are really full of shit on their resume. Mm-hmm. So because of this, a lot of managers get jaded. So even if you have a legitimate period of unemployment and all good reasons behind it, a lot of managers are like, I've been down this road before. I've seen people lie about this before. Or were you actually working and you're pretending that you weren't because you got fired? Like, there's a lot of things that people will make up in their heads.
Sure.
So just understand that that's a risk that you have to take. And I think your advice is really good, and especially with recruiters too. Like, tell the people that in the industry that do this for a living, like, I'm taking time off, but don't forget about me. Set a reminder, call me in 6 months because I want to know what's going on. I'm not leaving forever. Maybe you can help me understand what's happening in the industry. And good recruiters will do that pretty easily. And then those will be the ones that you would actually want to lean on at the end of the 2-year period. So you can actually kind of utilize the staffing industry to help prep for getting a job, even if it's 2 years from now.
Well, and that's what I mean by stay well networked, because if you're coming to the end of it, maybe you're 3-4 months out and you're like, I'm getting close. I should really get, ready to get back into interviewing and looking.
Yes.
If you reached out to your recruiters and you had kept in contact with them, a simple conversation could just be like, do you have any idea of things coming down the line that I could prep for, even of like, is there a new technology that's hot right now? Or is there something I should focus on? Or I don't know, but whatever it is, like, use your recruiters.
And we had a DevOps podcast recently where at the end we talked about like practical ways to get into that area if you haven't been. If you're in this spot like this consultant that I referenced, you could even listen to that, because even though that's about DevOps, we gave about 5, 6, 7 things at the end of the show about what you could do to like kind of get yourself prepped and ready, about like what to study for, what certifications matter. So you could be utilizing that same basic thought process about how can I prep for the next job or what have you. Last but not least, and I'll keep them nameless for anonymity's sake, but kudos to you. You said, I've been listening to some of your podcasts and they are awesome. Lots of great information. And of course, you're going to get more replies from me if you're telling me that the show's good. So continue to do that. But also, and I genuinely mean this, we love feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'll be honest with you, surprisingly, we don't get a lot of negative feedback. So if we're doing something that you guys think we can do better or have recommendations, fire away. Make a note on a LinkedIn post, a comment on our website, let us know. Reach out to either Amanda or I individually. Most of the time, our contact info is pretty easy
to find
in show notes, whether it's a Apple Podcast thing or it's a LinkedIn post, whatever. Yep. So there you go. There's your advice if you've ever wondered or you've ever thought about how in the hell would I pull off taking a year or two off. And if you've successfully pulled that off and we missed something, let us know.
Please let us know.
If we missed something.
And then we can share that. Yeah,
totally. So there you have it for the discussion on taking sabbaticals. All right, so jumping into our topic of the day, otherwise known as the soup du jour, we are going into politics, and who doesn't love that? We attack these topics on frickin' purpose, right? Like, a lot of people super nervous to do this. You and I aren't we're not lawyers. We're not professional HR people, so we're winging it.
And we have our own passionate political agendas or feelings.
Right. So, and that's from a political perspective, but just in general, we wanted to tackle these three because in my opinion, this is stuff you should be able to talk about. A lot of people have the stance of like, I just don't talk sex, religion, politics like anywhere. I will do that too if I genuinely don't feel like I'm knowledgeable. Like I'll just own that. But if I feel comfortable about my beliefs or what I know about topics, then I'm willing to debate it, and that's why we're doing it. So here we are.
Well, and I think that so you know so much about the Catholic religion.
Yeah,
so like in the last,
good, right?
You felt that way. Where I have found over the last few years that, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. So like if we're going to jump into this, politically, I do not debate politics.
Okay. For yourself personally?
For myself personally.
And that's irrelevant to personal/professional?
Correct.
Yeah.
Like just so people know, if you're listening, like I am not one anymore to go off on a rant in really any social situation, whether I agree with the person or not, because I am amazed at how much I don't know the more I learn.
Yeah.
And so,
but if you can walk into a quote debate, which is just code for a little bit of a challenging discussion, with that like understanding, that's a great predisposition of like, I don't know it all.
I don't. And neither does the person who is screaming on the other end. And you just go like, I understand that you feel that way, but there's so much we don't know. So I think the focus for us more is from like the HR standpoint of this, more so than any kind of, so if you're looking for a political debate, this is not that show. This is more of,
what the hell?
What do you do?
What are the laws? How do you do it? When do you?
What's okay? What's not okay?
Yeah. Could you be getting screwed over in a workplace because of one of these dynamics? Or have you been the person discriminating, for lack of a better word, and you didn't even know you were? What if your boss does these things? Where do you go? Like that's been the stuff we've been trying to focus on.
Yes. Right? And I've come across this stuff, specifically political, a ton coming from both sides.
Yeah.
So as a hiring manager and as an employee, as a new employee, all of it. So I've been on the side of the icky side of it, on both sides.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So let's do a little housekeeping first, in the sense of like, let's do a little bit of definition just so we know where we're starting. So here's and you and I teased this pre-show a little bit, because here's the interesting component. Federal law does little to protect employees from either being fired or disciplined for their political beliefs. Mm-hmm. Some people mistakenly believe that their First Amendment free speech rights extend to the workplace. However, for most employees, this is not the case.
Correct.
The First Amendment prohibits the government from infringing on free speech. It does not apply to private employers.
Private employers can totally prohibit your free speech.
Yes. So unless you work for the government, literally, like on your paycheck, the First Amendment does not limit your employer in any way. And even for government workers, First Amendment rights are not absolute in the workplace.
Correct.
There are some limited situations in which an employee is protected. So let's give those quick. Federal anti-discrimination laws, such as Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which we talked a good amount about, I believe, in the last episode.
Yep.
It prohibits discrimination based on certain characteristics, the basic ones, right? Like religion, race, gender, etc. If your political beliefs or activities are connected with one of these characteristics, you might be protected. So, for example, and here's a good one, if your boss fires you after finding out that you attended a Black Lives Matter rally advocating for police reform, he or she might be targeting you because of your race or affiliation, which is illegal.
Correct.
So, how do you prove that?
But you are not protected under the First Amendment.
Correct. So, like, that is the key thing. Like, if you got fired because of this example, that clearly, we talked a lot about the legalities of how the courts do things, and there's a bit of kicking the can in the judicial system. if judges don't know what to do. They just boot it up the chain, and that's how things get to the Supreme Court. So that one we could debate per se, but that's just an example of how that could be applicable. Another one has to do with union laws, which obviously only are applicable to certain people, industries, etc. But the National Labor Relations Act prohibits employers from taking negative action against employees for union activities. The law also protects non-union employees who are trying to unionize or who get together to try to improve their working conditions.
You have to be allowed to assemble.
Yes.
That hands down.
Yes. So, but here's a little, not necessarily a but because of politics often intersect with employment-related issues such as wages and healthcare, your activities might be protected under these laws. For example, if you talk to your coworkers about Bernie Sanders and his platform for a higher minimum wage, you might be protected. Because of the fact that even though you're explaining a personal opinion on Bernie Sanders and the platform, etc., you're referencing an area that is protected, specifically in this example, minimum wages.
Correct.
So that, like, there's a little bit of caveats here. So if you want to claim that your political views are protected,
you got to find the right way.
You got to have a specific avenue that is documented group protection that you can directly tie it to. So that's kind of the thing.
Well,
so that I know that's a lot.
Did you have another example?
No, that's it. That's a lot of info. And then after that, we can talk about how states vary, but that's kind of a federal component.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because depending on what you're attending and what you vocalize, it can also be not inflammatory, but just like offensive to someone else indirectly. So like one of the examples I read about in this article, which I think you might have the same one, is that a woman had attended the Women's March right after Trump was elected.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Right. And so she had a picture of that in her cubicle. And someone was offended by that, saying that the picture, the picture said "End White Supremacy." And so she was at the march.
Yep, and then
took a picture. There was a little kid, and he had a sign saying "Stop" or "End White Supremacy." And so, from an HR standpoint, you kind of go like, "Well, how could that be offensive?" But then someone in the department was like, "Well, don't you know white supremacy is code for Trump?" And so he then said, "Well, then I want to put up my own sign that reads deport all illegals." And here we go. And so thankfully they worked that scenario out by just, having another conservative talk to him
or something,
and just make him feel less alone. But like, that's where, so with all of the things that we've been talking about in this whole series, the word harassment from a legal term, we throw that around way too much. The problem is that what we sometimes view as a very benign picture or stance can affect someone very deeply, that it's maybe not even political. Like,
it's like an internal cultural division, argumentative.
Oh my God.
It literally, the argument is basically, it's causing a level of uprising and negativity in the department. Essentially, that's kind of where you're going, right?
Well, like, the emotions really run deep. So I'll give you an example of what's in my head of why I'm saying this.
Yeah,
so like when Trump was elected, I remember this very clearly. We were headed to deer camp right after that.
There's your northern Minnesotan coming out of you.
Hey, I hunt.
Our next survey question online will be, have you ever heard of what the hell is a deer camp? But anyways, continue.
So we go up there, and I end up having it out with my dad because he had voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't so mad about from a political standpoint, but as a woman.
Yes, it was all social.
It was all social, and so it ran.
And you were probably talking about two different things anyway.
And he didn't view, Trump's, derogatory and sexist comments as relevant. He was focused on the platform, which I understand.
Fiscal, financial,
totally
whatever.
straight, and ignoring all the other stuff. And for me, it was so insulting that my own father, would vote for someone that would just like discriminate and be so against women or so disrespectful. Like, that was insulting to me. Yeah. So, like, even though someone might be fighting with you over something politically, it's usually rooted in something much more
internal, deep-seated.
Yeah, like almost carnal of like things.
A core belief of something. Yes.
Where it was like, well, no, it's not that, it's this.
Right.
And so then
you add the fact that politics just in general gets just fucking 4-letter name calling all over the place, of whatever it is. I immediately thought of what we had dealt with here for a little while, where we in our morning meetings, we'll have just a little bit of a gab session beforehand, which I really enjoy, catching up, anything from how was your weekend to whatever. And,
it was a year ago.
And people will genuinely talk. So we're in the middle. It was a year ago. We're in the middle of some tough shit, like we're in the middle of COVID. We got government officials passing things that you either agree with or not.
And everyone's angry.
And everyone was angry. And I was cool with the discussion, although it was getting too aggressive. And then I think the thing that really sunk in for me was, I think ironically, it was when you and I spoke. I think that was it. But it was just like, it's not really a political debate for me. It's a negative shit talking
swamp
somebody
negativity,
being annoyed with each other. And then I'm like, what the hell is going on here? I'm starting off the day with people getting riled up.
And all in negativity.
Yeah. So my personal stance was, I just told the group, no more political discussions in our meetings. If you guys want to have at it on your own in the pit here, you want to talk about it, you can talk about it in the office, out of the office. I don't care. I'm just going to intentionally lock down that discussion for meetings because it's just not the right platform and it's ruining the tone that I want to set the day with. Irrelevant. Frankly, half the stuff my employees were talking about, I agreed with. So it wasn't even like a shut up because I don't agree with your opinion. It was like, this, the negativity in this fucking room sucks.
It was, and that was my point.
It was bad.
It was not like, hey, I don't want to listen to them talk about this because of political reasons. It was, this is so negative that it is, you feel it when you enter the office. And so that is also in the research that I've done, that's a reason why employers will often lock that down, because they're like, you could, if someone quit, they could claim not a toxic work environment. What's the one? I'm
not sure.
Shoot. But basically, where if you get fired, you can claim, or if you quit, you can still claim unemployment if it's
I know what you mean.
It's not unsafe. I know whoever's listening is like screaming it in their car right now.
Yeah, and I'm on the employer side of the unemployment system all the time. So, it's pretty clear as an employer, you have to have
don't give them the option to say.
You just have to have documented proof if somebody gets let go, that if they request unemployment, if you're going to attempt to deny it, you have to be able to justify it. Mm-hmm. And in theory, we could go through that. Actually, that might be a good idea for another show, because I could just we could go through the lists of things that automatically are going to get that request denied. But there's obviously, to your point is whatever the terminology is, it was essentially a unhealthy work environment.
Right. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. And then if you don't know, if you submit an unemployment request, it goes to your employer. There's online systems. It's kind of scheduled. It works its way through slowly, unfortunately. But if I, as an employer, reject an unemployment claim, anybody can appeal that. And then you schedule a phone-based hearing, which I've been a part of before.
Yep.
And then an actual judge makes the decision and it's final.
Correct.
So if you ever get unemployment rejected, there is absolute venues to appeal it. It's pretty simple. You don't need a lawyer. Like, it's not one of those situations. But anywho, if that
I
is
got the
information that
term,
you needed, go ahead.
Hostile work environment. Which, to be honest, a year ago, it was becoming a hostile work environment. I will say, Jeremy did a really good job. You did a really good job.
I think a lot of people would have disagreed with you at the time, but for you,
it was
a hostile work environment.
Correct.
Everybody else wouldn't have viewed it that way.
Yeah.
So would I have had grounds to terminate somebody for that? That's an interesting question, which you, I think, have more information than I do.
You do. You
as an employer.
Oh, but I don't want to give too much away because we do have a few questions.
Okay, so that's going to be part of that later. Okay, so then I'll jump into state-based laws.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the federal laws, right? So it's not directly protected, but it can be if it's connected to one of the protected groups, like legitimately so. Mm-hmm. For state laws, unless your situation falls within a few narrow categories, you kind of have to look at the state-specific laws.
Right.
The majority of states do not prohibit employers. I repeat, the majority of states do not prohibit employers from firing employees for their political beliefs or activities. However, a lot of states have passed individual laws. So obviously look up your own. We're based in Minnesota. So if you're curious, Minnesota people, the Minnesota-based laws, employers may not directly or even indirectly threaten discharge or financial reprisal to compel an employee to vote for or against a candidate, ballot question, or recall petition. So it's basically saying employers can't either threaten directly or indirectly anything having to do with termination or demotions to sway people to vote
on voting.
So there is an exception for employers that can establish that the desired political affiliation or viewpoint is a bona fide occupational qualification.
Correct.
So in theory,
literally,
an employer can say, I hire righties, and that's all I do.
And that's all I do.
To a certain extent, I don't know the specifics, so we could write this down as a question, but the way it's implied is that there's an exception for employers to do so. But the way this is worded, I get the sense that the employer would have to be able to justify why. So in theory, like if you fired somebody because they're a Democrat and you told them and they sued you, there's possibility that you as the employer would have to be able to defend the position as to how that person being terminated because they're a Democrat actually means a good thing for your business, as opposed to, I just don't like those frickin' people.
Well, it's employment at will. It's employment at will. So like, I can quit for any reason and you can fire me for any reason. That is not a protected class, right? So if you're like, I just know you're a card carrying Democrat, and I know I saw you at a rally, or I saw you even just standing outside a building where the rally was, you can get fired. Literally, the only time is if that rally or gathering is regarding a protected class.
Yeah, because I don't, hey, par for the course, I'll speak out of turn. We've heard of these things. I'll just generically throw this into cancel culture. Over the last few years, you'll hear stories of people doing something in their own personal life outside of work and fired for that, right? And it was because it was put on social media. Mm-hmm. So like you were on your own on a Saturday night, bomb downtown, video comes up of you doing something ridiculous, nothing to do with work, you can get fired for that.
Correct.
And politics can be a component.
Correct.
You know, so if you were at a rally and you're on video jumping over a police gate, you know, and
it doesn't have to be illegal. A lady was fired from her company for the picture on social media of her flicking off the Trump motorcade.
Oh, I remember that.
Do you remember that?
I remember that. Yeah, she was on a bike or something.
And so she got if they can prove that it could cause damage to their company image, I don't know if that's required or not, but I know that is basically you can have a clause of code of conduct clause saying if any of your actions inside or outside of work negatively affect our company image, and it's on social media. So like, I don't know that it's necessarily like if no one knows about it and you show them a picture of something you're doing,
right,
and no one was there, like you're not
damaging,
you're not damaging the company because no one's aware of it. But if this happened locally. I remember a few years ago there was a gentleman who, I forget what he said or what he did, but it was definitely in the not socially acceptable behavior in today's age. But that got all over social media, and his company fired him and said like that his views are not in line with the views of our company. Like they did a whole statement of like, we do not condone this, because you will get affiliated with that company in the news then if they're reporting it, and you can hurt a company's image based on your behavior. And so that is why it's allowed.
And I don't think that's going to change, but I do, times have changed in the sense that organizations in general used to basically just take stances of neutrality to not isolate any group, right? Hey, we sell products or services, so we're not going to say or do things that will intentionally piss off 40% of the people.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore. So
no, they're taking stands.
Companies will gladly do this. I don't really care. Like if there's companies that have done things that I'm like, okay, I don't like that, but I'm not normally the type that would be like, I'm boycotting somebody, whether you do or not, doesn't matter to me. But those things are more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to look into for our fourth show is, basically I'm going to dig into a little bit of this occupational qualification. Like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And, can you, is the burden of proof on the employee to prove that the company did something wrong, or is the burden on the company to have justification prior, right? So, and a lot of those, can be one direction or the other. So state by state, take a look. I have a big list in front of me of every darn state that has something. So obviously we can't go through that. But take a look at yours if that matters to you. So I got a couple of ways to actually effectively manage office politics that we could jump into. That might be a way to close it out. Do you want to jump into your anything else or your little game per se, or where would you like to go from here?
No, I think we're fine. Why don't you go into your section?
Okay, cool.
For now.
So, I basically just after doing some research, the recommendations is exactly what you would expect them to be. So I won't really go through this in a lot of detail, but let's just go Captain Obvious for a second. First recommendation, play nice. Courtesy, respect, politeness, office etiquette start and end with you. That is correct. Fight fair. Sometimes the game of office politics can get downright nasty.
Avoid terms like libtards.
That's a good, whatever, and the applicable for the other side.
Correct.
Right? Like even if you think it's funny, you're pissing someone off.
Trumper.
Sure.
Yep.
So a good recommendation that I did like was try to focus on the issue, not the person. So
you should always fight.
Stick to that. Just in general, my favorite advice about how not to fight with somebody is to use as many I statements as possible. So I feel this, I've had this happen to me, I believe this strongly because of this reason, as opposed to you SOBs always do this, I can't believe you did that.
Oh, and avoid the absolutes. Yeah, always, okay, never.
If you've been in any relationship of any kind for a while, you'll know how damn quickly things can regress if you get into the blame game as opposed to talking about how you feel. Keep your cool. That goes without saying. One that's tough, but really good advice. Forgive and forget. You can have moments where you get shaken by somebody, and as long as it didn't go too far, whatever your definition of too far is, be honest with yourself. Like, how long is it actually fair for you to, for lack of a better word, hold a grudge on this person? So try and forgive and forget a little bit. Try not to play favorites. So that's a good one. Another really good idea is frankly just to shut up. So Even though gossip is enjoyable, one good way is just to move on.
I walk away from it. I literally will go in my office and close my door.
Yeah. I mean, the article example was basically just treat gossip like it's junk mail. Just hit delete. You didn't want to read it in the first place. You know it's crap. Just move on.
Well, and you can stop people if they be like, I hear you, but like I just don't get involved in this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm willing to talk about something else. You know, you can shut it down too.
Yes. Two more. Again, these are just basically how to effectively handle workplace politics. This is more of the management side. Hire intelligently. If you're in a hiring capacity, screen potential new hires carefully. Ask candidates how they feel about workplace politics and how they might react in difficult situations. That's good advice, but don't slip into the I'm going to screen for this category. Right? Hire intelligently by screening people properly, talk in general about the workplace politics, but you don't lead the witness is essentially my point.
Well, I mean, one of the things you could screen for if you're not interested in basically extremists or like politically fiery people, like you could screen for that, ask some questions just to see like how intensely they are, and because it's not so much of it's not what side you're on.
Yes.
It's the bitching, the intensity, and the complete lack of regard for other people.
And this is a classic third, and thirds, in my opinion. You know, you got a third of the group that really cares about the left, a third of the group that really cares about the right, and a third in the middle that either doesn't care or isn't sure. So it's normally pretty clear to know what side people sit on. So the last one is acquiesce. Accept the fact that office politics happen in every workplace. If you spend all your time worrying about water cooler chatter, you'll never have time to manage your own projects. Mm-hmm. A degree of complacency will help keep you sane. And then, you know, basically, if your job is just flat out a hub of office politics nonsense and like you can't do your job well, it's not worth the hassle, etc., then look for another job, pirateconsulting.com, and we will help you get there. So there, you know, it's kind of what you'd expect it to be. But it's also the classic, like, you know, everybody kind of knows this, but the actual implementation and execution of play nice, fight fair, keep your cool, easier said than done. You probably already know where you are on the spectrum of this. Whether or not you've been a little too aggressive in your opinions, whether or not you might need to actually show a backbone because you think someone's being a dick about it around you. Mm-hmm. So kick it around for yourself, and then there are some recommendations.
Well, and kind of in that same vein, know your company's political views and don't forget that they could be a fireable offense.
Yeah.
I think that was a big shock to people over the last few years, and that's why I think your follow-up for the next episode will be good, of how far does that extend, who has the right of burden, like you said, just so we're all aware, because whether you're listening to this from an employer standpoint or an employee standpoint, I think it's just important for us to know, because some of us, me included, back when, because this is getting worse, and it's, you know, the 2016 election was definitely a tinderbox is the word I'm thinking of, tinderbox. And since then, it has been intense. And I remember from years past how many very emotionally charged and just intense things, even that I was saying, you know, and I was a supervisor at the time, or a lead. I think I was a lead. And like, Republicans were not allowed on our team. We had one, and the poor Nikki, he took it like a champ. God bless him. He's actually such a wonderful man. But he was the lone conservative on a team of young, very outspoken liberals.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, looking back, one, like you were just saying, like, I don't want to be the ringleader in this. I probably shouldn't have been the ringleader.
Yeah.
and should have shut some of that down, because I'm sure he sat there in that room just going,
this sucks.
This sucks.
Yeah,
and he can't say anything.
And
He's
if
the
I
only
say anything,
one.
I'll literally be laughed at.
You'll be
scolded out of the room.
And be like, basically, well, it invalidates his opinions when you're the only person there and no one is going to be on your side, listen to you or take you seriously. You are completely invalidated. And that is no way to be at an office and in a work setting. Like that, just as a human, that sucks.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was going to say, actually, I just remembered from your last bit, was something that's helped me in the last probably year or so is trying to have some more empathy, of like literally put yourself in those people's shoes.
Yeah, because every time I hear the phrase, like, essentially, it's not a specific phrase, but somebody is commenting and it's basically like, what's wrong with those morons?
Right.
And I say the same thing every time. I'm like, I 100% agree with you, right? Maybe I do in the moment, but I'm like, you have to understand that they are looking at you exactly the same. Like, you don't even understand how they could have possibly have come to that conclusion, and they are equally dumbfounded that you came to yours.
You do not know their experiences. Yeah. You don't know. And I think that was what was so hard for so many women with the Trump stuff, is like there's so much abuse and stuff going on that we as women have to deal with, harassment and abuse, manipulation. And to see people get behind a man that would talk that way about a woman or treat women as they are or disregard their rights, that wasn't, like, I don't think a lot of people understood really how much that rocked people.
No, because I think for them, it goes back to your dad example, frankly. It's not on their radar. Either they don't care or it's not their preference. You know,
and we feel so insulted, or at least I did. I was so insulted.
And that's fine, but frankly, that person might not be being rude. Like, it might be like, okay, like you can hate him for any reason you want. I voted for this person because I want the government to spend less, or I want the government to spend more, or whatever.
Well, you rank things differently than I do.
Exactly.
So, like, some people will rank fiscal conservatism way higher than social issues, whereas that would be me, of like, that'll trump, pun not intended, but that'll trump the benefits of being conservative every time, because for me, that's a human level, right? Where I'm like, how can I be like, oh, I have more money in my paycheck, but you don't get health insurance that you need. Like, I can't as a human do that. So for me, that's
right, and that a
motivator.
That's the friggin' point, right? So like, you know, where is somebody else coming from? It's always a different arena. But I get it that people get supercharged about this stuff. I do find it funny that damn right it's hard to put the shoe on the other foot. But if you can at least if you can at least understand the fact that people just think differently. You don't have to understand how they think per se. You don't have to truly get it. Maybe if you could get there, great. But like just understanding that people have different opinions is basically half the battle.
Well, and you and I have recently talked about this. Just this morning we were talking about this, of people's reactions and viewpoints, and what they say and do and all that is more about them and their life experiences and their, the lens that they're looking at with, more than it has anything to do with you. So if someone is truly a staunch Republican and they are far right, there's going to be a reason for that, whether it was how they were raised or something happened to them, and then vice versa. If someone's like, I don't care about any of those conservative views, like, it's social issues, hands down, this is what we need to do. Well, what kind of trauma happened to you that is so in the forefront of your beliefs that you're willing to sacrifice money for it, So
yeah, so like in the Nikki example, right? Like that would be one where you're not going to argue your way out of this. You might intentionally take the quiet, the acquiesce example from before. A lot of it just has to do with people, flying off the cuff. If you notice, half the time these discussions come up, people jump into the conversation at a 9.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're
not listening.
They didn't get riled up over 20 minutes. I mean, it was a like, what the fuck did you just say? And immediately just triggered. So, hey, shit happens. Here's the problem. You're just not as protected as you would want to be if you think you are. So if you want to put sexual and religion harassment on the same level as politics, it's just not.
It's not.
It's just not. And frankly, I'd be surprised if it ever is, because
but it's super hard to manage from an HR department. Like that's why it's part of this. Is it's still a taboo thing, like where it gets muddled. But it's of the 3 topics we're doing, it is the least protected by far.
And that's why most companies go as neutral as possible. Like if we're going to have issues, we're going to solve this by minimizing the discussion, minimizing the I can't even think of the right word. Just, in that example of the things on the wall, right? Like, you could, if you were the boss in that situation and people are putting stuff on your cube wall, you could go both ways. You could be like, all right, both people get to put something up, or let's just agree to not put any of that stuff up because it's a problem. And I don't know if either one of those are better than the other, but that's just kind of an internal philosophy of how you want to run things. If you work for a big company, and I say this every one of these shows, then you probably have a real sophisticated process of HR and documentation and employee handbooks and all this stuff. There's a reason why when you sign a contract for something, it's 39 pages long.
Yeah.
And it's because that company has ran into 8 million situations where lawyers get involved and there's yet another subsection, yet another article, yet another topic put into that contract. And that's how some of these employee code of conducts come into play. They're 19 pages long for a reason.
Where they wanted to fire someone but didn't have it in writing, and they're like,
so
okay.
now it's documented so that we can use that to our advantage. And I'll go through that employee handbook with every new employee, covering the highlights, of just like, hey, here's the sick policy, and here's this policy, and you have to update it. But then if you don't have it documented, then you don't really have a good leg to stand on. So that's why companies do all that stuff. And then obviously be smart. 2 different things. If you don't want to work for a company that's super liberal, then I don't know why I first thought, don't work for Starbucks corporate. You know what I mean? Like if you know it's a problem, then don't go work there knowing that it's going to be combative. You're not going to go climb the ladder and change their culture unless that's your goal. I guess it's kind of weird, but so in the I forgot my second one, honestly, but just be I remember now. Be smart about the company that you're looking to go to. If they have if there's a challenge there, be honest with it up front. And then in addition, like it or not, and I don't know the rules behind this, but be careful what you put on social media. Companies will Facebook the hell out of you. Yes. And if you're a part of 37 political groups and it's like all of your posts are vitriol hatred, like you might not get a job because of stuff like that.
You need to make sure it's private, and you need to understand that it's public.
Yeah.
Though it's online, so you have to be careful.
If you're not technologically savvy, Google how do I go private on Instagram. It's pretty damn easy, So
well, and what I was going to say is some states actually do protect people's social media accounts, just because. Well, actually, I don't know why, but there are certain states that will protect it. So know if that's your state.
I'm going to look into that for our 4 show, social media protection.
Yeah, because then that's a different story. I don't know the specifics, but I just read that.
But the reality is the social media is just good advice, because I don't care if you were shirtless partying on Friday or if you're like super, whatever in your political beliefs, like you could have an employer just decide not to go there and you would never know. So, a little bit of the, try to limit the opportunity for a existing or future employer to want to think that you're going to be a problem, liability, etc. If you don't care, then do it. If it so matters to you that you would welcome an employer rejecting you, well then cool. Then you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, just be aware that
know that's a
you
thing.
Could lose your job.
Yeah,
correct.
That's a thing. That is a thing. All right. Do you want to jump into? Would you call it a game? Is this fair?
I don't think it's a
quiz.
Game. It's so basically there are a handful of examples here or there are questions of. Here's what my company wants to do, or can my employer do this?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm going to read the question, and then I'm curious. Now we've talked about some of this, so some of them might be easy.
But we didn't prep on this, so I don't know.
But we didn't prep on this,
yeah.
So I just want to know your answer to the questions of what you think is the right answer.
Got it. Are we doing multiple choice?
No, just yes,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I guess you could do a maybe, but you'd have to back it up of why
Fair
you said
enough.
maybe. Okay.
That's fair. Fire away.
Okay. So number 1, can my employer fire me for what I do on my own time outside of work?
I think the reason is I think the answer is maybe. And I read a little bit about this, so it's a lot off the cuff, but obviously we've seen this already. So it has to be legal, but I'm willing to bet there's some caveats about either what you were doing or how. So that's my best answer.
That's good. It is a maybe or it depends, depending on the activity involved and whether that activity has any legal protection under your state's law.
And legal is a good component as well, because there was another thing that basically said it's the article that I read was essentially from a lawyer to employers. So it was worded this way on purpose. And it basically said, if you want to fire somebody for something they did outside of work that was not breaking a law, you might want to talk to an attorney. If they broke a law outside of it, I think it's a little easier, but you disagree?
So this is what it says. It says, so if the reason for your termination is not illegal,
Yep.
under the laws of your state,
Yep.
then yes, your employer can fire you for what you do on your own time outside of work.
So that's implying that you could be fired for doing something illegal or legal.
Yes.
Okay. So
basically,
the answer's a little more yes than maybe, but it's still maybe.
It's mostly yes, but some states, New York, California, Colorado, North Dakota, do have laws that prohibit discrimination against an employee for participation in legal activities outside of work hours. But otherwise, no, you are an at-will employee.
And I'll be honest with you, I actually disagree with that. Like, if I could change the law, I would want it to be, you get to do whatever you do on your own time. And
what if it's hurting company image?
Okay, good point. You'd have to really be able to prove that, but because I think you could argue anything. But good point. Yeah. Anyways, all right.
Number two. My company has announced that it is going to fire anyone who is a smoker after strictly enforcing an anti-smoking policy at work for several years. Can I be fired for smoking on the evenings and weekends, even if I have never violated their policy at work?
I'm a quick no. I don't think you can be fired for that.
Maybe. A new trend is increasingly taking hold where companies looking to reduce their health care costs have established not just a no smoking policy, but a no smokers policy. These companies not only refuse to hire smokers, but some are even taking the drastic step of terminating current employees who smoke.
Okay, that's not shocking because
obviously some states have laws preventing employers from discriminating against smokers, but other
this
states
shit's tough because it gets into addiction. And the reason why, like, I can understand a healthcare, I think it'd be very understandable for an insurance company to say, we are going to raise rates on somebody who smokes. And if a company is having their rates go up year over year, and a lot of it is because of that, I would argue there's some justification, but like, and this one sucks for me because I've been a tobacco user for a long time, and this is a very easy discriminated group of people. So it's basically super cool to just pass anything you want against smokers, force them 8 miles away. In Minnesota, they built an entire U.S. bank, $1.5 billion stadium, 100% funded, I believe, don't quote me, but quite a bit, on tobacco tax. So it sucks when it feels like with smoking, we as a society are talking out of both sides of our mouth. Yeah. Like, we want, quit. It's better for you. But if you're going to smoke, we're going to tax the living shit out of you. I mean, packs of cigarettes are $10 a piece, and I think Philip Morris gets $2 of it. Like $8 of the price is taxes. So it's a little weird, but getting fired for that, all right, oh, okay. All right.
It does say, though, that most of the companies implementing the anti-smoking or anti-smoker policies are giving their employees time to quit and are supporting their efforts by sponsoring programs and paying for aids to quit smoking, like medication, and that's a good gum patches. Okay?
But, you know, if you work for a gym and you're burning heaters out back, I could understand how you're hurting the
your company image.
You're hurting the image, but... even though I've personally smoked with multiple trainers before.
Yeah. All right, number 3.
Go.
I have a blog that I write on my own time. I occasionally mention things that happen to me at work, but don't identify who my employer is. Can I get in trouble for this blog?
I don't think so.
So they didn't give a yes or no at the beginning. It just says, generally an employer can fire you for having a personal website or blog that it deems inappropriate, with very limited exceptions. Even if you have a non-work related website that you don't access from your office, employers can fire you if they feel the content on your site or blog is offensive to them or to potential clients, or it reflects badly on the company.
And this is tough because, you know, we're in a capitalist society on purpose. I don't want the government forcing employers into like unnecessary regulation any more than I want them forcing me to keep an employee.
Right.
So I respect that as an employer,
but it
sucks as a human.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, so I have a website that I build on the side because I love playing softball, and I get fired because there's pictures of us drinking post game. Like, what?
Or maybe you have cheerleaders that, you know, you put your wives in risque outfits and they're like, no.
Yeah, that sucks. As a human, that sucks.
Is there anything I can write about in my blog that I cannot be fired for?
Oh. I would just assume it's as simple as the protected classes.
It's a few things. So in some states, if you write about political matters, you may have protection under laws that make it illegal to discriminate against you for engaging in political activities. So that would be, again, just the states that have some protections. There's not many. A handful of states have laws restricting an employer's ability to fire you for lawful conduct outside of work. Which could offer some protection. But if you're whistleblowing, you have some protection. You may have some protection if you've reported to a government agency first.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's important.
And that's why I went with what I did on the previous question, because the question was very deliberate to say, I don't give out the company name. I don't name drop, you know, like I'm talking, like the way I gave the example of the consultant earlier, I was very intentional to not, out the person. Not that there's anything embarrassing.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, okay.
The other one, it has to do with if you're forming a union or otherwise banding together for bad working conditions, you may be protected under the labor laws. And that makes sense.
Specifically the federal union laws that we touched on earlier.
Ooh, I like this one.
Fire it up.
I have a second job on weekends, which never interferes with my work for my full-time employer. My employer's personnel handbook has a no moonlighting policy. Can my employer restrict me from working for someone else when it does not interfere with my work?
I would say the simple answer is yes. I think the caveats probably have to do with something along the lines of conflict of interest. Could you be violating like a non-compete agreement? Is there proof that your activities outside of work are directly affecting what you do 8 to 5? That's what I bet you it says. Don't answer yet, though. I think that's bullshit if the answer is yes. Like the way I say it is, I don't give a crap what you do outside of 8 to 5. I mean, I'm in the staffing business. I've helped multiple people get second jobs. You know, so I don't.
What if there's staffing on the side?
But that's what I meant earlier. Like
if
there's a conflict, if there's a non-compete agreement, like if they are building a business to replace, like if they're building a competing business, like damn right that's a problem. I've run into this directly in our industry in staffing. There's a good number of people that are independent, incorporated, maybe even just 1099ers that, do recruiting and staffing on the side. And anytime I've thought about hiring one of those people, I have very deliberate discussions of what are you doing with the client base? Like, you have to understand, I can't hire you.
Yeah.
And during work or whatever, like, you're working on your other business.
Correct.
So is that kind of what the answer is?
So it says it sometimes falls into a gray area, but the answer is probably yes, your employer can restrict you.
I think that, and I understand that, but my personal opinion is outside of a direct conflict of interest. If you want to work as a server, if you freaking make, if you do underwater basket weaving, what do I care?
It's really, they do say if it is essential for you to moonlight for financial reasons, or you're gaining experience which could help advance you with your current company, then they say talk to your supervisor or someone in HR to find the reason behind the policy, see if they can make an exception. But literally, when you are employed with them, they can say you're not allowed to be employed elsewhere.
And a lot of employment agreements have language in there on purpose about this.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, outside of a conflict of interest, the only reason why I would ever terminate somebody for that is if their external activities to the job is dramatically affecting what they can do here. So if you're working at night, but you close down the bar as a bartender, and you're getting home at 2:30 in the morning, then naturally over time, it's going to be tough for you to be what you can be at 8 o'clock. So
if you guys haven't noticed, this isn't about necessarily political. This is off-duty conduct that we're kind of discussing because it's so deeply entrenched with the political side of it. So for this one, actually, it's on our list to cover on the next podcast as a follow-up. My company has a policy which requires employees to report to the company if they're dating coworkers. I recently began dating someone in another department. She doesn't supervise me or work on my team. Do I have to tell the company that we're dating?
Okay. My thought would be legally no, but you can be terminated for that. I think the easy problem is dating in the hierarchy. That obviously is a problem. You can't be dating somebody who is subordinate to you. I would argue other office, other department should make that legally cool. But to answer the question, I don't think you have to tell them, but I think they're equally allowed to terminate you for that reason. Is that accurate or no?
This is saying, from what I'm understanding, is they have to have a policy. So it says some companies are concerned about sexual harassment, and so they institute a strict anti-nepotism or dating policy from dating certain or all coworkers. Really, it's typically designed to prevent you from dating someone in your chain of command. But make sure you do not violate your company's policy, which may be more strict than other more common policies. So, it depends on if they have a policy or not, but if they can absolutely make that policy.
A former employer had very strong opinions on this, and theirs was the chain of command was irrelevant, although a factor, but it really was not like that. It was a problem before the chain of command. If you were dating somebody in your local office, you had to physically move to a different office, or you could go to a different operating company just because they had other organizations. That was it, like, period.
Yep.
So even if you were on the same level, both line level employees, not even on the same team, don't report to each other, don't report to the same man. They didn't care. Like, no nonsense
they went for.
Yeah, they just shut it down. I'm not
no fraternizing.
I'm not of that opinion. I think dating relationships in work are okay to a certain degree, almost inevitably understandable with the amount of time spent together sometimes. But The hierarchy for me is the make or break.
So that goes right into the next one here of my company has a no fraternization policy that restricts managers from socializing with non-management employees. Is it legal to have this kind of policy?
Man, I think it is, isn't it? Kind of sucks.
It
but
absolutely
you can tell the
is.
manager you can't go drink with your employees
Correct.
after work. Yeah.
So recently, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, recently upheld a very restrictive anti-fraternization policy, which made it against the rules for a security company's guards to fraternize on duty or off duty, date, or become overly friendly with the client's employees or with coworkers.
I think that's fair, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Because especially in their job, you know, like your role is to have a zero tolerance policy of changing the security, whatever, and you're becoming susceptible to favorites, for lack of a better word.
The only caveat is, you know, they fought it, obviously. They argued that this kind of provision in general, not specific to an actual example, but in general, they were saying it discouraged workers from exercising their right to organize unions and engage in concerted activity because of the whole you can't even be overly friendly kind of thing.
I would feel if you'd have to document that on purpose.
Well, and
you'd have to be like, we're thinking about unionizing and it's a complete farce just so that we can go drink. You know what I mean?
Well, and this is where it did get unclear. It said, while their ruling does state that we believe the employees would reasonably understand the rule to prohibit only personal entanglements rather than activity protected by the act, it's still unclear which personal engagements, they are in quotes, would violate the company's policy. So it's a little gray.
But yeah, that did make me laugh, though, because it was probably a very professional circumstance where said security guard had a challenge and maybe got legal representation and they fought it all the way up, or that was just one really horny security guard.
We've all been there, too.
And thought that was bullshit. Like, why can't I go out with, you know, Steve if it's a female security guard or whatever? You know, you get the idea.
Like, she's really cute.
I know. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
I'm not letting her into the building. You have security cameras. You can see what I'm doing. Those are tough, though. Those are tough.
There's one. Okay, there's a few more, but I can.
Cool bonus round?
Yeah, bonus round. So I smoke medical marijuana in a state where it's legal. However, my employer fired me for testing positive for marijuana. Is that legal?
Absolutely, and unfortunately so. That's weird, right? If you live in Colorado or one of the main states that this stuff is passed, employers can still utilize weed as a suitable drug to withhold employment. And it's just as simple as it's not a federal law. So
Correct.
State by state, they can make it legal, but employment protections are federal.
Correct.
So since it's not federal for marijuana, it doesn't fall under the same thing. Really, really weird situation, right? Like, you know, it's legal right next door. Ironically, in a former employer, I had that situation where we had a big rah meeting in Denver one year. And on stage, the president was like, I'm very aware that this is legal in this state, but you're not allowed to. It's a part of your employment. You will be terminated. Like, it doesn't matter if you're in a state where it's legal. We brought you here, you're on duty. And then in addition, like, it's not federally protected. It just isn't. However, here's a fun one. I might have mentioned this on a previous show. First time ever, a few months ago, we had a client request us to do a standard 5-panel drug test, but exclude marijuana testing. So,
which I think is fantastic.
So it's slowly but surely being pulled out of the standard employment screening.
It'll get there.
Yeah.
It'll get there.
And then if and when the federal thing changes, it just overnight is irrelevant.
Number 9, I recently came out as gay, and when my employer found out, I was fired. Is this covered by discrimination laws?
I think it depends on where you are. I think if you work for a church, it's not covered. I think if you work for a private employer, it is covered. That would be my guess is what the answer is.
You're right on. It's maybe. The answer differs between states.
Okay.
And depending on whether you work for the federal government or a private employer. I actually think it's flipped. And you can go into
you're
the actual,
automatically protected if you work for the government, but you're not automatically.
Right.
How is that possible?
So it says check out this page, which I don't have open, but it says it thoroughly covers topics like protection from discrimination, the legal differences between sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, and whether you can take leave for care for your partner and more.
Okay, so I'm going to add that to follow up for the sexual harassment. Can you be fired for coming out as gay while working for a private employer? And we'll do a little research on that because it seems cut and dry for federal employees or state or just government.
Yeah.
So city, county, federal, etc. But if you're a private employer, the way that's worded is that you might be able to let somebody go.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that.
I wonder why that would be.
So I want to find that out.
Yeah, so I'll look into that. So we have 6 or 7 things for sexual harassment and a couple for both religion and political harassment that we'll follow up on. That's literally going to be our next episode. We tend to drop shows weekly. So
with the series we're doing weekly,
right? So
otherwise it's we're
always a little behind. As we mentioned earlier, the first of the 3 is available, and then the second one will be available soon. We'll come back with a show again soon to follow up on this, and then jump back into our normal routine and get back to some other topics like technology and then just general hire and fire type stuff. Otherwise, thank you for listening. We love having you. Comments, please. We would really appreciate them. Good, bad, or indifferent. Not kidding. Feel free and rip me, rip Amanda, rip us. That's totally cool. Hey, I don't like getting, smack talk to me, but that's how you get better. And then we're going to continue to do this. Also, we're trying to get better at doing more on our vlog series. So sometimes those are kind of like little videos summing up an hour-long podcast.
Oh, and I would love to know if there's something you'd like us to cover, even if it's just you're curious about our Jeremy or I's opinion on something. Yeah. Like that would be fun too. Right. Because you may not know.
If you just want to hear an employer swear over vlogs, that's fine too. I don't mind doing so. Not superfluously, hopefully. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Hire and Fire podcast brought to you by Pirate Consulting. Please check us out online via LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at our website, pirateconsulting.com. That's PIRA consulting.com.